Welcome everybody to the Indie Game Academy and to From Nothing to Flappy Bird in 2 hours. This is a recording of a live online class we hosted where we brought total beginners from knowing nothing about the Unity game engine or C# programming to building their own custom version of the classic game Flappy Bird. It is taught by one of our professors, Dylan Craggle. You'll also see me kind of chilling in the background, but for the most part, Dylan will be taking good care of you today. Now, if you enjoy this one, we hope you stick around, hit that subscribe button, and come join us on Discord. Enjoy!
Yeah, so again, I'm Dylan Craigle. I'm a technical designer, which is basically a fancy word for someone who does both programming and game design, sometimes neither. And so I've been at the Indie Game Academy for a bit now. I have been teaching people on my own team inside the Academy just what it is that Unity is capable of and all of the other things that Unity can do. I've been teaching people programming and a bit of game design for a good while now, especially on the programming side. It's always been one of my favorite things to teach people because it's this mind-blowing thing of, wow, I actually made something that does what I want. It says hello world on the screen, and that's awesome. And so every time I teach someone that, it's like going back to myself, and I just go back to my old days of learning programming, and it's just been one of my most favorite things on this world, honestly. And so I'm going to be teaching all of you how to make Flappy Bird in Unity from absolute scratch. I am curious, how many people in here are complete newbies at Unity? I know a few of you have some experience, but how many of you are truly starting from scratch, from nothing, to becoming a Flappy Bird god? Yeah, Josh is raising his hand. There's a chat box at the bottom right if you want to put it in there. I won't be paying too much attention to that, so I'd prefer it if you could unmute, but no problem if you can't.
Yeah, we usually, you are very welcome. We even encourage you to turn on your video cameras if you are comfortable, because it makes us better at teaching. We can tell if you're having a problem or if you need help or whatever, and it's just a little bit more connective since we're working online. And then audio, keep yourselves muted unless you are currently talking, but please feel free to jump in and unmute yourself. This is meant to be an open hangout. And then you can use chat if you would like.
Yeah. I'm going to be relying on you guys for a lot of awesome questions, because one thing that a lot of people don't do is they don't ask questions, and it confuses themselves. And if you do ask that question, then it probably means someone else has that question. So you're not only helping yourself, but you're also helping your peers. Because if I've been teaching people for a while, but I've been actually programming and making games for longer, so there's a lot more stuff that I know that it's not going to be in this. Even if it's something as simple as like, hey, what is that if statement? Can you tell me how that works? I might be able to go over it very briefly. And yeah, we're still waiting for a few more people to come in. I think we might get started in a minute or two. But again,
oh, you know what?
What's that?
One thing that we didn't say,
Yeah.
Has everybody here downloaded Unity? And has everybody here started an empty project just to make sure you can? We're going to show you making an empty project. Has anybody not downloaded Unity? Go figure, you need Unity for a class on Unity. Who knew? I just dropped a link in the room chat on the right-hand side. You hit the little chat button if you want to see it. And that is to the Unity download page. If you have not already downloaded Unity, please start right away. Hit download Unity Hub. That is its own separate application that Dylan will talk about a little bit in a second. Use Unity Hub to download the most recent stable version of Unity. It usually recommends the right one. So if you just hit download inside of Unity Hub, you'll get the right one.
Yeah, so whenever you're creating a project, we'll be creating a 2D project. We'll be going over that ourselves. But assuming everyone has Unity Hub downloaded on their computer, it'll look something like this. I'm sharing my screen right now. It will show all of the games that you have made with Unity on this current computer, and it will also show you all of your Unity versions that you currently have installed. What Unity Hub is really great at doing is connecting Unity versions with your games. So there's a lot of different versions, and typically if you switch versions, sometimes it breaks things, especially if you're doing really advanced features that change often. So what a lot of people do is they stick with a single version, and it would be really, really tedious if you had to keep track of which games use which versions. And so that's what Unity Hub is for. It connects those two very nicely together. Is anyone not having Unity Hub installed? Just in case you don't have the actual version for Unity installed, if you go over to the Installs tab, then it'll show this button at the top right, Install Editor. If you click on that, you'll want to go to just the default tab of official releases, and usually you just click the thing on the very top. And once that's done, it'll take maybe around 30 minutes at most. Then you go back over to projects and you can actually start creating this project. So now, assuming everyone has everything installed and ready to go, to create a project, it's really simple. Most of you probably already did this. You just click the New Project button, and it will give you a list of templates, because Unity is a very big piece of software. It's used for a lot more than just games, but it is mostly used for games. And so it will start you out with the 3D template. You'll want to click 2D. It is possible to switch between 3D and 2D. It's just a bunch of default settings, but stick with 2D just for the sake of this class going smoothly. And then it will ask you on the right what is the name of the project and what location it is in. And I'm just going to call this, Flappy Bird. And I have it as a very special location. You can change that if you'd like. But after that, you just have to click Create Project. Super, super easy. Now, then a window for Unity will open up. I can't drag it over to the side of the screen, but it usually takes a few minutes, as you may have noticed, for Unity to open up for the very first install. But after that, it usually just takes like 10 seconds at most, at least on my computer. Does anyone have any questions about Unity Hub and how to get this stuff going while we're waiting on this project to install? Unity
also,
is... What's up?
I just wanted to reiterate one more time. It is super normal for people to be behind. If you are missing anything, if you're forgetting anything, if it's not working correctly, please let us know as soon as possible. It's way easier for us to immediately fix a problem than it is to find out that you had a problem 30 minutes ago and now you're hopelessly far behind. So really, like, no pressure at all. If you're having a problem, just let us know. We'll talk about it. There'll be an instructive moment for everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that we really like to keep close to our hearts at Indie Game Academy is the 3 core tenets that we share to everyone at the start of every class. And our 3 core tenets are something that we take very, very dearly, and we hope you take dearly as well. The first one is just to have fun. We're making games. We're in this industry probably for a reason. We probably aren't doing it to make a paycheck. We're doing it because it's awesome and it's fun, and we're making games, and that's a wonderful thing. Our second core tenet is to celebrate. If you've done something awesome, if you've done something that you've never done before, that's the perfect reason to celebrate. Celebration is a great way to keep you motivated, and we want you to celebrate other teammates' progress as well, because it motivates them, and then they'll be back and motivating you, and it just creates a wonderful environment.
Should we show them how to celebrate and gather?
Yes, that's... Go ahead.
Is that dangerous? Okay, everybody, I want you in gather. Make sure you have gather selected. Go ahead and hit yourself the F key right now to celebrate opening Unity. Wow! Yay! You. That is maybe the best feature of Gather. So when somebody does something cool, when you are grateful for something, go ahead and hit F. It's the best.
We probably should have warned them about the volume of it, but yeah, it's fine. Another thing that I find also very important in Gather is you can press Z to start dancing.
It's like the small celebration.
Yeah. It's a smaller celebration, but it's still really fun.
Yes, love it.
Our last core tenet is to be kind and patient with each other. Not everyone is on the same step as you, and if we can create a kinder and more patient world, then all the better for everyone, right? All right, so as soon as Unity finally opens up after you create the project, this is what you'll see. It's a lot of different windows everywhere, a lot of different buttons everywhere. Most of these tiny little buttons are nothing that you'll touch very often, but it is ultimately really, really simple. There are 4 windows immediately on the screen. In the very center, you'll see the scene. Does anyone know what a scene is in Unity? Yeah, Anil, you'll be fine with loading a little bit longer. I'm going to be going over the layout, so you should be able to just keep on watching the stream. Does anyone know what a scene is?
The scene is when you where you edit the level and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially a level. So in Mario, every single individual level in the game is a scene. But it's more than just that. It's also the main menu and the credits screen. It's just any individual place that has objects individually from any other place in the game. So maybe you have the level select screen different from the main menu. A scene is just a collection of objects and components, and you can move them around and lay them out. It's essentially a level. I'm going to start a timer so I can keep track of time better. As soon as I can find the darn thingy. Okay. So the very middle is your scene view. It's where you will be able to click on things and actually place down objects and move stuff around. There's also the hierarchy on the left. That's where it shows all of the entities and objects that you currently have. Right now there is only one entity on the screen, and that is the main camera. Every scene comes default with a main camera. You'll also notice that as soon as you click on the main camera, either right here inside the hierarchy or just in the scene by clicking the camera icon, on the right side the inspector will show up with all of these different options. The inspector is a window where it will show you the fine details of different things inside of the object that you are currently viewing. So you'll notice that this main camera has 3 components. We'll be talking about components in a bit. It has a transform component, a camera component, and an audio listener component, and you can even change all of these settings around as much as you want. At the very bottom, you'll also have the project window, and that's essentially your file explorer. It's where you see everything from what images you have to what scripts you have, all of that kind of stuff. It works the same way as your Windows or Apple File Explorer. There's also some scenes that are not immediately shown. There's the game window, not scene, where there's a tab right here. You can click on game, and that will show you the player's view of what the game looks like right now. Right now there is nothing inside the scene, it's just this void, so that's why they're only seeing blue right now. We'll change that so it'll look quite different. There's also the console at the bottom. This is where there's a bunch of stuff like error messages, and you sometimes might print things to the console to help debug. And this is a very important window. I don't really like that they have it hidden by default, and the initial layout is a little bit confusing, so I'm going to change this a little bit by moving the console out of the project so it's no longer in tabs. You can do this just by holding down on the console and dragging it. You can see I can move it anywhere I want and it might snap in place. I can put it up here, but I'm going to snap it so that it is at the right side of the project. I'm also going to give it a good bit more room because the error messages are horizontal, they're very long, and so it's very helpful whenever the console itself is also very long. You can also snap to the top of it just to drag it down a little bit because we don't need it to be quite that vertical. And we also like to make it so that we can see both the scene and the game view at the same time, so we can snap that out and move it to the right here and give it some space. Last thing that may or may not be for you, it's up to how you like your file explorer, but on the project window there are these 3 dots right here that give you a few more settings. If you click on those dots, you'll notice that there's a option for 1-column layout or 2-column layout. Personally, I prefer the 1-column layout, and I know a lot of other people do as well. It essentially makes it so that you don't see this extra column that shows all of the individual files. It just shows it all in one neat place. So if you prefer that, be sure to select that option. Does anyone have any questions before we get started actually adding stuff to the scene? Like, Anil, do you have your Unity open? If anyone doesn't have Unity open, then feel free to mention that. All right, you do though. So Unity is a game making engine. So we're going to start actually making some stuff inside the game. Okay, Tyson does not have anything yet. What is the progress bar at? Yeah, it's hard to tell.
Is it, Tyson, do you have it downloaded and creating a new project? Is that what you're waiting for?
Okay.
Well, I was downloading it earlier, the Unity Hub, and it says that the editor is still downloading.
Yeah, that can take some time.
Yeah, so I think I have it on a different laptop setup, so I'm trying to access that.
Okay.
But
We do have, we always record these classes and we always send them out to everybody who attended afterwards. So worst case scenario, you'll be able to look at the class and catch up on anything that you missed too.
okay, I'll still probably listen just to
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hang out and you can ask any questions you've got as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to start putting objects in the scene, and we'll make something that kind of looks like a game, and hopefully by then you will have your stuff up and running, and so we will be able to get you caught up to speed then. All right. So again, each scene is a collection of objects. So in order to get started in Unity, we have to add some objects to the scene. So to start out, what we're going to do is add in a player and maybe something for the player to stand on. So in Unity, in the hierarchy specifically, there is this little plus button right here, and if you click on that, it'll give you a whole bunch of options and branching options to add in different things. And what we want to do is create a ball to act as the player. And so we can go to 2D object. We want to create a sprite, create a circle. And it'll ask us to name it. I'm going to type in player. You could type in something like bird or Flappy Bird, whatever you want. It's just nice to keep things consistent, so I like using player for a lot of games. Now inside of the actual scene view, you can click and drag to put this player anywhere you want, even outside of the camera. And so I'm just going to put him a little bit above. I'm going to create another object, so again, clicking that plus button, going to 2D object, sprites, and this time I'm going to create a square to act as the ground for the player. Put that down here. So if you click play, the game will actually start playing for you, and it'll be awesome. Well, it actually won't do anything, because we didn't tell it to do anything. Computers are very specific. If we don't tell it to do something very, very specifically, it just won't do it. They can't read our minds. And so what we can do, if you click the play button again, it'll stop playing the game. It's very important to click the play button to stop and not the pause button. If you click the pause button, then it'll put the game in a stasis where if you make any changes and then you stop playing, it'll revert all of your changes. So you definitely want to click the play button to stop the game and not the pause button. A lot of people get that confused at first. And so now to actually add in some behavior of this ball and square, we want to use the inspector to add some things to it. So we can just click them in either the hierarchy, or we could click on them inside the scene. And again, all of these options will appear just to kind of give you an idea of how the inspector works. If you click on the camera, then you'll see this camera component right here. And it also has this option. This is the second option in the camera component called background. That is the color of the game view. You can change that to anything you want. So I think Flappy Bird is more of a teal, something like that, maybe. So I'm going to change it to that just for my own sake. You can change it to whatever color you want. You can make it blood red. We also can add in new components to the player and square, or any object, even the main camera, by clicking the Add Component button. Is everyone caught up to speed here, by the way? Does everyone have a sphere and a square inside of the window? Does anyone not have that, rather? Okay, awesome. Now, in order to add in additional components, you just have to select the player, again, either through the hierarchy or clicking them in the scene. If you click on this Add Component button at the bottom of this, you can start typing out what you want to add. You can also use this navigation menu. What we want to do is make it so that the player falls and can actually move around, kind of. We want it to have some physics and all of that good stuff that it comes with. So does anyone know what component we need to add to this in order to give it physics?
I do.
I do too.
Gravity? Yes, we'll be adding in something that gives it gravity. It's not called gravity, though. If we type in gravity, we'll notice that nothing comes up. RB2D. Yes, it is in the Physics 2D category. If you go to Physics 2D, you'll notice a whole bunch of stuff come up. And Kokoro is actually correct. If you type in, well, he's kind of correct, he shortened it a lot. It's a rigid body 2D. What a rigid body is essentially, it's a component that tells it that this is a thing in the activated space of the world. It controls all the physics and whatnot, so it will have colliders and all of that stuff. And you want to be very specific about adding the rigid body 2D component, not the rigid body not 2D component. Unity was originally built for 3D, and they added in 2D later, and so they added a 2D suffix to everything that is only for 2D. If you click on the rigid body without the 2D, then it will be acting in 3D space, and it won't mess around with any of your colliders or anything like that. So you definitely want to be very careful about selecting rigid body 2D. Alright, so if you add in the rigid body 2D component, you notice this appears right here, and if you click play, something cool happens. It falls, and it goes straight through the block. Does anyone know why that happened?
I do. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing to stop the ball. The box does not know that it's supposed to collide with anything, because again, computers are very specific. It doesn't know that it's supposed to have this component for a hitbox. So we need to add a collider to the square. So if we go to add component, if we type in collider, then we'll get a whole bunch of stuff. Some of this will be 2D, some of this will be 3D. You have to be very specific about hitting the 2D again. And we want to choose a shape that kind of represents this square, so there's a box collider 2D near the top, so we'll add in that. Now if we click play again, the ball will fall, and it will still go right through the box. That is because we also need to add in the collider to the player. If you only add it into the walls, then the ball will not know where it's supposed to collide. So we have to add it into the ball as well, the player. So if we go to add component for player, there's another kind of collider that we want called a circle collider 2D. So if we add in that, then we'll add a collider to that. And it will automatically determine the bounds of the collider and all of that stuff. So if we click play now, the physics will actually work. It falls down and it hits the block very nicely. You've got a game. This is something that we can work with.
You're all game developers, yeah, good job!
Is everyone at this point? Is anyone a little bit behind? Yeah, and Tyson, by the way, whenever you get Unity up and running, feel free to just shout that out and we can get you caught up to speed. Okay. So, it would be kind of boring if we made a Flappy Bird with just a circle and a box. So let's actually add in some sprites. We can do this by going over to Google Drive. I'm going to put this link in the chat right now. Again, the chat is at the bottom right of Gather. If you click on that, it will give you this download that you can have. And I believe it looks differently for you. It looks something like this. And there's a download all button right here. And if you click on that, it'll prepare to zip it up and all that nice stuff. These are all of the assets that we're going to be putting in the game. It also has some example scripts that we will be using. It also has a lesson layout for all of the stuff that we are going to cover. So if you ever go back to this and you're trying to remember what exactly we went over, there's a lesson layout right there that goes over it perfectly. So when we download this, we can open it up and there's a, if you're on Apple, it'll of course look different, but this is the file explorer. You'll get a bunch of files in here. Specifically what we are worried about right now is the images, but we can't just drag and drop it right now because right now it's in a zip folder, so we have to extract it first. If you, I believe, right click, yeah. If you find it in your folder, this is my downloads folder essentially, you can right-click it and go to Extract All. If you extract that, put it on your desktop or anywhere you want, and you'll get this. And you can just go into Unity. It's really, really easy to add stuff to Unity. You literally just open up the file and drag all of this into your assets, and it will import everything for you. It'll take a small moment to do this because there's an error in that. That's a shame. Because there are new scripts being added, and so Unity wants to recompile everything to make sure it's all okay. See, there's also a error here. Ooh, I know.
Everybody's going to wind up having to fix that then.
What's that?
Did it go away?
No, it's because there's a input controller script that I completed that I did not rename the stuff inside of it. All right, so there's an error in the console, and this is actually a perfect example of what an error might look like. Whenever you are scripting, which we'll be going over in a bit, or whenever you are even adding in third-party stuff, you might get these errors in the console, and usually they'll tell you exactly what's going wrong. So in this case, it says error at this line. It's at line 7, column 12, and it goes over it in excruciating detail. So in this case, the solution is just to delete this file. You want to go into the scripts folder and delete the completed input controller file. That is a script that we will be programming ourselves, so it's all right to delete it because we'll be remaking it anyways. It's going to have to reload and recompile again because it has a whole new load of scripts. All right, another thing that this will give you is inside of the images folder, there will be 3 images. There'll be a Flappy Bird, a pipe, and a sunny background. And it's really, really easy to add these to the scene. You can literally just drag and drop them from the folder into the scene. And yes, that is a very large bird. We don't want it to be quite that large, so we could scale it down. But instead, I kind of want to reuse the stuff that I already have. So I'm going to delete this. You can right-click it and click delete if you want. And you want to select the player, and there's a sprite renderer component here. This tells it how to look like what it's looking like right now. And there's an option for sprite. What we can do is just drag and drop Flappy Bird into the sprite section right here. And so now it is a Flappy Bird, and it will have all of the components that we already told it should have. We can do the same thing with this square. We can make it a pipe. But for now, I'm not even going to do that because Flappy Bird is not like other games where you're actually standing on things. Flappy Bird is more you're avoiding the pipes. And so I'm actually just going to delete this square entirely. Actually, I'll keep it around for a little bit because if we click play right now, you'll notice something weird happens. What was that? Flappy Bird just went down and it kind of got stuck inside the block. Does anyone know what happened? Yeah, the collider is too small for the image. So by default, whenever you add in a new sprite, it won't reset the collider. So in this case, if we actually zoom in on the scene by using the scroll wheel, we'll notice this green outline of a sphere. And that is the collider. So whenever we click play, we can actually see it inside the scene view. The circle is resting perfectly on top of the square. So we went to fix that. Luckily, it's really, really easy. We can actually just go over to the right here, and we can click this. There are 3 dots right next to the circle collider 2D component. And if you click on that, you can just click reset. And it will kind of do a bad job of doing that because it is currently matching it to the size of the image. Now, in order to make it so that the collider is a bit smaller, there's a few ways we can do this. I think the easiest way is there's a button right here inside the Circle Collider 2D component. And if we hit this button right next to Edit Collider, we'll go into Edit mode. And you'll notice there's very tiny squares right next to the edges of this circle. If we click and drag on those, We can start to resize this a little bit. You can resize this however you want. I think about there is good. So I'm going to keep it like that. I think this Flappy Bird is also just really big in general. So I'm going to use some of these tools up here to manipulate it. You'll notice that there are tools at the top left of the scene view. The very first one is the move tool, where it just pans across the screen. You can't actually interact with objects, it's just for moving around. There's also the actual move tool, where whenever you select an object, it will add in these Y and X axes, where you can essentially drag the object around. There's also a blue box in the middle. If you click on that, you can free move it around. There's also a rotational tool, which allows you to rotate stuff. There's also a scale tool. A scale tool is what we will be using. And you'll notice that there's also the Y and X axes, and there is a white box in the very middle. If you click and drag there, you can resize the bird, and you can make it however big you want. I'm going to keep it about there. So now if you click on play, you have a normal sized Flappy Bird, and it connects with the box quite nicely. All right. Willem, could you go over with Tyson to help them out? Would you be okay with that?
Yes, I can. Tyson, if we walk over to the left-hand side, there are little sort of breakout rooms. Why don't we head over there for just a second?
Mm-hmm. So if you go and gather, you can hold down WASD to move over to those breakout rooms.
Okay.
And you can hit escape to exit his full screen if you didn't already see that. So I'm going to walk over to the left over here.
Okay. Is everyone at this point? Or is anyone not at this point? Is a better question. Awesome. So now we want to, I do not want to continue to the scripting section without Tyson. So let's see, where are we?
So I'm a little bit behind.
Sure. Where are you at right
I
now?
still have the error, and I'm not able to resize the hitbox for the Flappy Bird.
So for the error itself, that is not your fault, by the way. That is absolutely my fault. So if you go into the project view, or you can go into your file explorer, if you go into the assets folder and you go into the scripts folder, there are a bunch of scripts in there. Some of them start with completed. You'll want to find the completed input handler. I believe it's completed input controller. If you click on that, right click it, delete it, that should fix the error. Is because I made an oopsie and changed it in one place but did not change it in another place, even though I tested it. Okay, and Paula has one quick question. You missed where you can set up the different camera proportions. Oh, so are you talking about how the Flappy Bird is small? So there's, I think you mentioned the camera sizes. If you click on the camera, you'll notice that there's this size option, and you can type in whatever you want there. There's also widgets right here for you to change that as much as you want. That's not how I'm going to be doing it though. I like the default size personally. And so instead, if you click on the player, this is for you as well, Josh. If you select the scale tool, there's a white box in the middle of Flappy Bird. You can just hold left click and drag that down to make it smaller. I can make it even tinier if I wanted. Another way you could do it is inside the inspector. There's this transform component that is on every object. And there is a scale section which represents how big this object is. So I could manually type it in there as well if I wanted to. Okay. Does that answer your question, Paula? And Josh?
I was just wondering, how do you change the hitbox size? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I think you made it a smaller circle or something like that.
Gotcha. Yes. So there are two ways to do this. You can select it, and inside the inspector under Circle Collider 2D, there's this button called Edit Collider, and right next to that is a button right here. If you click on that, it'll have these little boxes appear right next to Flappy Bird, and you can drag those. Another way to click the same button is whenever you have the player selected, you'll notice that there's a extra tool at the very bottom of that section. That is edit bounding volume. That's another way to get there as well. And so you just drag those until you get the size you want. Does that get you where you need to be? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Sweet. Then, while we are waiting for Tyson to come back, we can also do some extra things. Like we can move in a sunny background. And you'll notice some weird things appear here. You'll notice that the square is actually behind the background and the player is in front of the background. Again, you can just put down this background by going from the project window, finding the sunny background and just dragging that into the scene. You notice that the box is behind it, but the bird is in front of it, which is not what we want at all. So Unity, I've noticed, does really weird things whenever things are on the same z-axis. This is a 2D game, so we have an y-axis and a x-axis, but there's also a z-axis, which determines how far things are away from you. You can actually mess around with this a good bit by going into the scene window. There's a button a little bit hidden that says 2D. It's right next to a light bulb and a weird circle. So if you click on that 2D button, you'll notice that the game immediately flips into 3D mode, and it looks really, really weird. You can turn that off again if you want. I'd recommend turning it off. But you can use the 3D mode of Unity to actually reposition your sprites so that things appear in the order you want. So, what's that?
Dylan? Yeah, when I put the image in, both of them were behind.
Yeah, Unity is really weird about it. I made an entire game once, all inside Unity, and as soon as I exported it, it was random whether or not sprites were in front of each other. It was horrible. Okay. So we can actually move this back by selecting the sunny background and going to the position. And in this Z section right here, we can type in a 1 to make it go farther away from the camera, and that will position it right there.
Cool. Thank you.
Another way you can do it is mess around with sorting layers and order in layers, but we are not going to be messing around with that for the sake of this. I just got a Discord notification. I'm going to turn that off. Oh, never mind, it's Willem. I actually don't know who that was. Okay. Alright, so I really don't want to continue without Tyson. I'm going to be right back and help her out, but what you can do in the meantime is, if you can move on the pipes onto the screen to set up 2 pipes so that one of them is at the bottom and one of them is at the top, and rotate them so it kind of looks like this, and that's exactly where you want to be, and we'll be messing around with that with a bit while I go over to help out Tyson. Hey guys, I just wanted to make sure that everything's okay over here. Everything good?
Yep, everything's good. We're kind of we're getting her to log out and come back in so that we can look at her screen.
Okay.
At what point are you guys at this point?
I'm ready to go into the scripting world, which is why I don't really want to leave Tyson behind. But I'm going to go over the like a little bit about scripting. I'll do Hello World, and then we can after that Tyson should be fine, I think.
Okay. Hello World would still be important for her to...
Well, I actually done coding before, so I know like Hello World and stuff like that.
Okay.
I mean, Unity might be a little different, but I've worked in like Python and C, so I can probably pick up the coding pretty quickly.
Yeah, we do really like coding here anyway. Okay, perfect. So we'll bring... You go by she, her?
Yes, she, her.
We'll bring Tyson over in like 4 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the coding part of the class. This is where things get really, really interesting. This is where you are able to start actually making things completely your own, because Unity doesn't have everything built in. It doesn't have things like press space to jump or anything like that. You have to code some behavior by yourself. Does everyone have pipes on the screen, by the way?
I just put one pipe in. I'm trying to do the collision for it. I'm not sure what
Okay.
type of collision to use.
Yeah, you don't have to do collision just yet if you want, but good thing to do now, I suppose. All right, so we are going to move on to the coding section. Again, this is where things become very powerful for Unity. I'm also going to delete this square because I don't need it anymore. And so in order to create additional scripts and features for Unity, we have to add in some manual code. What I'm going to be going over is the absolute basics of code. I'm going to be going over what a script looks like, and we'll be making a few scripts ourselves, and then we'll be adding in some scripts that have already been completed for us to make this game a little bit more complete. So in order to start adding in additional scripts, again, this is in the project window. You right-click on the scripts folder, and this menu will appear. If you go to the very top option, create, we want to create a new C# script. And it will ask us to name this something. I'm going to type in hello, capital H, no space, world, capital W. And that will create a new script for us. It'll start to compile a little bit, but not much. And as soon as it's ready, we can just double click on Hello World, and that will bring up, most likely, a very useful application called Visual Studio. Is everyone able to open up Visual Studio? You might not have it downloaded by default. Usually Unity installs it by default, but you might have accidentally unchecked that option. Does everyone have Visual Studio opening? This is a really important step, so I wouldn't want you to miss this.
I have it open.
Okay, sweet. You have Atom. Oh, it opened up Atom by default. Okay, so what you can do is if you want to change your default editor, then you can go into File and at the very top left of Unity, and you can select Project Settings. Is that in Edit? Yeah, it's under Edit, and then you can go to the very bottom. There's an option called Project Settings. That will open up a whole bunch of stuff for you. And one of these tabs on the left is Scripts somewhere. Coding. It's one of these. I don't touch this very often, so I'm not super familiar. Version control, visual scripting, no. Is it just editor? Let's see. External tools. Was there an external tools thing? You must have sharper eyes than I do, because I do not see this at all. External tools over here. Wow, usually I find this right off the bat. Preferences. Okay, it's in Preferences, not Project Settings. That would make sense. It's in under Edit, Preferences, and you'll notice a window pop up. There will be a section, it opens that up right off the bat for External Tools, and the very first button over there, thank you for pointing that out, I was lost, called External Script Editor. And if you click on that, it'll give you a few options. There should be Microsoft Visual Studio 2020 whatever right there. Do you see that, Paula? Okay, yeah. If you click on that, then if you exit and just click on your Hello World script, then it should open up Visual Studio. If anyone does not have Visual Studio, you can also use a different editor. You can even use Notepad if you want. Visual Studio is an IDE. It's an integrated development environment. It basically integrates with Unity very perfectly. It even has some stuff like Unity Message, and it tells you how many references are in the game. And it will give you stuff like compiler errors before you even save the script. It's really, really useful. So whenever you open up a script, you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of weird words, weird symbols, and it's all very alien. It's like this entirely other language, because it is another language. But once you start picking apart the pieces, it's a little bit easier to understand. At the very top of the script, you'll notice that on each line, there's something that starts with using, and then it has a namespace. In this case, it's system.collections. At the very bottom of this block is using Unity engine. And what this means is that this script is allowed to access... Oh, now your sound isn't working. I was just about to ask. Oh, that's Tyson. Okay. So whenever you have this by default in here, it means that this script is allowed to use anything in the Unity engine scripting world. That means that it can use stuff like get component, and you can use scripts involving UI and sound and a whole bunch of stuff. You definitely want this in there, and it'll come by there by default. Up here is also system.collections. That's essentially a way to collect things into boxes and arrays. There's also system.collections.generic, which is even more confusing. You don't actually need these. If you really wanted to, you could even delete them. It wouldn't cause any harm. But there's also no reason to necessarily delete them. If they're there, they won't do anything bad. Next up is the public class hello world mono behavior. It's a mouthful. Hello world you might recognize. That is the name of the file that you created. If you ever change the name of the file, so if I rename the file itself to something like hello game, then I have to be very, very careful to open up that file and change this name right here to match that file name. So hello game in that case. What this whole line is basically saying is that we are wanting to create a component called hello world. So we want this to be public, in other words, accessible to the entire game, to all of these scripts. We want it to be a class, so this is a collection of behaviors and properties. We want to name it hello world, and then it is inheriting mono behavior. In other words, this is a component. You don't have to worry about all of this right now. It's more for advanced programmers. So long as you don't touch that line, you should be fine though. You notice right after that are some curly braces. You have an open curly braces and a closed curly braces. And what that means is it's encapsulating everything right outside of this. So everything inside of these curly braces belongs to this component. It belongs to hello world. And so you'll notice that there are some things inside of this. There is a void start and there's a void update. There's also some text here. So all of this stuff belongs to hello world. These start and update things are called functions. Whenever you see a name of something and then 2 parentheses after that, that is a function. It is something that can do something. So for example, update is where I might cause a weapon to fire bullets or a wand to conjure fireballs or something like that. Start is where I might do things like initialize some properties. Start is, it says it right here in the comment, start is called before the first frame update, so it's called whenever this object is created, whenever you play the game, just once. And then update is called every single frame, usually at 60 frames per second. These green words, by the way, are called comments. If you ever start any line with a // it'll turn green, and you can put in whatever you want, and the code will completely ignore that. So it's a really good way to make it so that you can write down comments for yourself that the computer will not mess with. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Oh, one more thing is that you'll notice that start and update start with void. Essentially that is saying that this is a function and it does not give anything else to the code. It returns a void value. We, again, won't be messing with that very much in this course, but there are other functions that return numbers, and so that would say int start. Int is short for integer. So if that was a function that returned a integer to be used anywhere else, it would say int start and then open parentheses, etc. For now, you don't have to worry about the void so much. It's basically just saying that this function is something that does something. It doesn't give you anything, it just does something on its own. And then inside of its own curly braces, everything inside of here is stuff that belongs to the start function. Does anyone have any questions before I go on? Before we start actually saying hello to the world? Hello world is typically your very first program you write as a programmer. It's been historical, and so I'm really glad to actually teach you this as your very first program. And it's actually a really, really easy program to make. So what we want to do is create a component that when it is attached to any object, whenever the game starts, it wants to say hello world to the player. And so what we have to do is call another function in the game called print. So we want to type in inside of these curly braces print, print. And then we want to have open parentheses and then close parentheses. And then after that, we want to put down a semicolon. A semicolon is pretty close to the enter key on your keyboard. Now you'll notice that there's red squiggly lines. That's because it says there is no argument given that corresponds to the required formal parameter. It's really, really confusing at first, but once you start programming more and more often, these error messages start to make more sense. Essentially, this is saying that this print function shows something to the user, but we have to tell it what to show to the user. In order to give it a argument to show to the user, you have to type that inside of these parentheses. In this case, we want to show a message, a collection of characters, a string. And so in order to type in something like that, a message, this could be anything from a word to a sentence to anything else that involves letters. We want to type in double quotation marks, kind of like we're saying something. Now, as soon as we put in those, the error message goes away. And we can just type in whatever we want. You can type in oogly, or you can type in hello, comma, world, exclamation mark. As soon as we do that, we can save. Be sure to click Control S or to go to File, Save, because it does not do that automatically for you. You have to manually do that. All right, so after you have this hello world and you go back to Unity, oops, not that. You notice that it comes up with compiling scripts. That means that it has understood that you are trying to save something. And so now, after it goes away, if you click play, it won't show anything yet. That's because we only created the script, we aren't using it yet. Is everyone at this point? Is anyone behind? Awesome. You guys are great. All right, so whenever you click on the player, we want to assign hello world to the player. And the cool thing is that we actually already created a component and it actually already does everything we want. So if we click this add component button, again, in the inspector window at the very bottom of the inspector, there's an add component button. If we click on that, we can just type in hello world and you see it right there. Be sure to click on hello world and not completed hello world. So if you type in hello world, it attaches itself there. And there's no properties for this because we didn't tell it to have any properties. So we can now just click on the play button. And if you have this console visible, notice that it prints a message right there. Hello world. Hello computer. All right. Now that we've done that, another really cool thing that we can do, just to show off the other function inside of this default script, there's another function called update, and update is called once per frame. So if we actually take this line and copy it and then paste it over here, just right click and paste, and maybe we can change the name of this. So instead of saying hello world, maybe it says hello human, and be sure to Control S, save that. If you go back to Unity and click play after it compiles, you'll notice that the console, once it loads, gets flooded. It says hello human, hello human, hello human, because it's doing it every single frame, 60 times a second, a lot of times. Already, my Unity editor says it's been called over 1,000 times. So if you go back to Visual Studio, this is all we need in order to understand the fundamentals of programming, what we are doing, again, is typing inside of these start functions and update functions what we want behaviorally to happen. And so in order to cause a behavior to something, we call other functions. And so in this case, we are calling the print function, and we are telling it that we want to print hello world. All right, so if we go back to Unity, then we can, I'm actually going to just remove the hello world component. I can click these 3 dots and click remove because I don't want it to spam me too much more. And now I can get started with actually making something that feels kind of fun. So what we're going to do now is create another script, and we want to make this something that allows the player to jump. So we can right-click on the scripts folder, go to Create, C# script, and type in jumper. So instead of just jump, we want to type in jumper. So it's like a verb. This is a component that does something. So this is jumper. You can name it whatever you want, but jumper is what I'll be using at least. Okay, now if you double click on that, Visual Studio will open up to this new script called jumper. And is anyone not ready to start scripting in jumper? Okay. All right. So we might want to make something that is not just called once. It might not be called every frame. We can actually create new functions entirely. We can actually delete these start and update functions just by moving over them and pressing backspace. Oh, I have a weird editor recommending me things. So if you just delete that, we want to make our own thing called, our own function called jump. So if we type in public space void space jump, that's a capital J, then open parentheses, close parentheses, and curly braces, this is a new function. You might have noticed that I inserted the word public here. That is very explicit. I want it to have public there because I'm going to be calling this function from other components. If I did not have public there, then it would be hidden from other components. It would be called something, and it would be internal, and that's a little bit more advanced stuff. So we want this to be public, and that will allow it to be called from other functions. So inside of jump, we want to actually get some behavior to make this go up and eventually fall back down. It's really, really easy to do that. Does anyone have any ideas as to how we would make this jump? How would we do it inside the actual editor? If we were manually controlling this, how do we do it? We could move it up by manually increasing the Y. You could also go into the rigid body, and I believe under info, you'll notice that there's a section for velocity. It doesn't let us edit that manually, but we could increase that so it has a positive Y velocity. Yeah, you guys are nailing this. It's just like in physics, we want to add in some force. In my case, I actually am going to manually change the velocity because force is a slightly different thing. And I want to make it jump immediately. So in order to have, first I'm going to assign this jumper component to the player. So I just type in add component and type in jumper. And now I want this script to be able to call on the rigid body 2D, and I want to get to the velocity, and I want to change that to something. So in order to do that, I can add in a property up here. So if I give myself some space, I can type in public space and then rigid body 2D, capital D. This is case sensitive, by the way. And I'm going to call it whatever I want. I'm going to call it controlled body. I'm going to name that with a lowercase c and a capital B. just because that's the naming convention. It's not super important. Oh, they're coming back in now. So if you type in this public rigid body 2D controlled body and you save this public keyword is important because that means it's exposed to Unity. If you save this and go back into Unity, eventually it will compile, and you'll notice something cool will happen right next to the jumper script. It adds in this extra option. Welcome back, Tyson and Willem.
So you guys have the input controller working and you're making the jumper right now?
I'm making the jumper first.
Okay. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
So Tyson can plug right back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Tyson, I just created a extra script called jumper, and I put down public rigid body 2D controlled body, and then I added a function called public void jump. And whenever you do that and save, you'll actually be able to go to the player and click add component and type in jumper and just add it in directly there. Let me know if you have any questions.
My option isn't appearing.
Okay, so first, did you save the jumper? Sometimes it doesn't work if you click on Control S and then switch back to Unity. That should work.
Yeah, I saved.
Okay.
Oh, I guess I forgot a curly bracket.
Ooh,
I got 2 errors.
is it giving you an error?
I got 2 errors.
Okay.
Curly
What does it
bracket expected on the first error, and type or namespace definition or end of file expected.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like you're missing or you have an extra curly brace somewhere. This thing about programming is that it's very specific, so you should try to make sure that you have, for every open curly brace you have, you should have a closed curly brace. Does it look like this, where there's one here, one here?
If it's if you feel like it's if you feel like it's possible, this is one of those. I'll usually at least get one person to share their screen so we can fix an error like this, so people can see fixing it. But that's up to you. I can also take them off to the side and fix it if you want.
No, it's fine. So Miguel, do you know how to share your screen?
Yeah. I switched out the rigid body line and the public void jump line.
Ah, well, there you go.
I think I'm sharing my screen. I'm not sure what I'm sharing. Oh yeah, I'm sharing Visual Studio. Okay. Yeah, so all I have to do is just type the lines again. And that should fix it.
Why is
I'm
your
sorry,
typing
quick
so
question.
Absolutely.
How do you add the jumper again?
Oh yeah, so if you, did you create a new script called jumper?
No.
Okay.
I guess how do I add the script?
Yeah, I should have explained that as well. So if you go into your assets in the project window, if you find the scripts folder, you can right click on that, and at the very top there's create, and then you'll want to click C# script.
Okay. And then call it jumper?
Yep. You can call it whatever you want, but I'm calling it jumper for the sake of it, because it is something that causes you to jump.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll bring that back.
So bullet void jump offer up.
And Tyson, this is what you should be typing, what Miguel is typing out right now.
Okay.
You'll notice that there is a semicolon at the end of controlled body. That is important because it is saying that we are declaring that this is a property that exists in this component. Whenever you'll also notice that inside of the hello world, we put a semicolon after print. That is us saying we are declaring that this is something that we are doing. And every time we end any line inside of a, pretty much any time we end a line that is not a curly brace, we put a semicolon at the end of it, saying we are declaring that this is a thing that exists. Okay, yeah, you're all caught up to speed, Miguel.
Yeah, it worked.
I'm having issues because I was able to add it, but I don't know how I make edits to it because my Unity's a little different.
Okay.
You should just be able to double click on the script.
Yeah, if you double click on the script, it might take a bit, but it should open up Visual Studio.
If you don't have a script editor, it may not, so just let us know what happens when you double click on the script.
Yeah, when I double click, it tells me to open something else, so I think I might have to do it in Notepad. Would that work as an editor?
You could. It's a little bit tricky because then you won't have your essentially you'll be missing out on spell check. So it won't be able to tell you whenever it's missing something. Yeah, if you click on, so it's asking you to open in which application. If you click show more, there might be the option for Visual Studio. I would hope so.
Oh, hold on. Well, now I think it's just letting me do it in Notepad because I clicked Notepad. I don't know if there's a way to.
We'll do little enough coding here that Notepad will work fine, but definitely get yourself Visual Studio Community in the future.
Yeah, Visual Studio is absolutely awesome. I think, so as a FYI, if you go into Unity Hub and you go to your installs, if you don't have Visual Studio installed, if you click this cog symbol right next to your version, you can click Add Modules, and then it will have Visual Studio checked by default, and you can click Continue, and that will install everything for you for the future. All right, so now that we have this public rigid body, controlled body, and we go over back to Unity, and we click on our player that has the jumper component attached, it will have the controlled body. Oh, by the way, you can, just so you can catch up, there's also a completed jumper script that shows about what we've already made so far.
Okay.
If you want to reference that. I think, no, I'm thinking of Notepad++. All right. So now that we have this component added, it has this area called controlled body, and this is another option that we can add. And what we can do is just drag and drop right here, this tab rigid body 2D. We can actually just drag this and drop it straight into this field for rigid body 2D. Another thing that we can do is click on this circle right next to it, and this will open up this big menu, and it will say player right here, and we just want to say, yeah, we want to the rigid body on the player. So we can double click on that and it will assign it there. Now that we've done that, inside of our script, we can actually start referencing that rigid body, and so we can start doing things to it like changing the velocity and whatnot. So inside of this jump function, I want it to jump, I want it to move up. And so I have, actually open this up on my side so I can reference it. What I want to do is type in, where? Controlled body, because that is the property that we have added. We want to just copy and paste this name essentially. It has to be case sensitive. And then, in order to access a property of said property, in order to access a property of this rigid body 2D, we want to type a period after that. This is like accessing something. And then we want to type in the velocity. Your Visual Studio might also be recommending you a bunch of code things.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know why it's not giving me those suggestions anymore.
Yeah, for me it is giving the suggestions. Maybe it's an option that I accidentally turned on somewhere and forgot about it. You don't need the suggestions to keep up.
I've had it turned off and on for various reasons. I think it's something to Google later because there's a lot of different reasons that it might not be working. You can try closing and reopening Visual Studio if you want to try that. That'll sometimes fix it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That usually works for me.
All right.
All right. So what we want to do is set this velocity to something else. And what this velocity is a vector 2. Does anyone remember what a vector is in math class from high school? It has been years, hasn't it? So a vector, and it's essentially just a collection of two numbers. Yeah, so Anil says x and y, or maybe it's magnitude and direction. So in mathematics, it's usually angle and magnitude. In programming, it's just x and y. It's literally just a collection of two numbers. All a vector is a x value and a y value. That's it. So if we click the period here, you'll actually notice that there are just two properties. There is y and there is x. That's it. But what we want to do is assign this a new velocity. We want to make it a new velocity that goes straight up. And so in order to give it something new, we want to assign to it. So we want to click an equals sign, space, and we want to type in something new. We want to type in new, space, and then we want to give it a new vector 2. So that's capital V, vector 2, and then open parentheses. And then inside here, we can type in whatever properties we want for this particular vector 2. So this has to be a number, so this could be something like 0, and in order to separate multiple arguments, you have to press comma and then something else, so 5, for instance. And then it's also giving this squiggly line because we always need to end it with a semicolon. I don't want to just be able to type it in every single time though, but every time I want to change it, I want to be able to edit it inside the Unity editor, just like I can edit other properties like the color on the camera, for instance. So I can actually add an additional property up here called public int. Int stands for integer. It's a whole number, so 0, 1, 10 billion, -2, etc. It's just not a floating point number, which is to say it doesn't have the decimal. So it's not 2.5 or anything like that, or it's not 2 and 2/3. It's a whole number. So int, and I'm going to name this jump amount, and end that with a semicolon. We can also give this a default value by just assigning it, so equals, and I'm going to assign this like 7. I mentioned floating points as well. If you wanted to give it decimal places, then I can actually replace this with float, but I'm not going to be messing with that for now. So now, in order to plug this jump amount into this vector, I just have to copy and paste this name and type it in right here, jump amount. Now if I save this and go back into Unity, everything should compile fine, but it won't jump. And that's because we didn't tell it when to jump. We gave it a new behavior. We said it can jump, but it doesn't know when to do that. And so just to show that this code is in fact working, what you could do is rename this jump function to something like update. And then you can save that, go over, and you'll notice that it just goes straight up as soon as it compiles. And that's a good way to test just to make sure it works. There it goes. Goodbye. But we don't need to do that. All right, so I'm going to rename this back to jump so it doesn't constantly rise up, and I need to tell it when to jump. So typically, whenever Flappy Bird jumps is whenever you give it some input to jump. So I actually need to create another component called input controller. I could do this inside of the jumper component, but if I had put everything inside a single component called player controller, for example, then that's a lot of code inside one little thing, and it's fine at first, but whenever you start to create lots and lots of code, you'll quickly find that it's becoming overwhelming and there's just too much in there to actually keep track of. And so splitting things over into multiple scripts is a great way to keep things organized. All right, so if we create a new script, is anyone behind, by the way? Does anyone not have jump with control body, velocity, etc.? Whenever you save this and go back into Unity, it should give you an error if it's not working. If you right-click on scripts to create a new script, on the scripts folder inside the project window, that is, if you right-click, go to create, we're going to create a new one called input controller, capital I, capital C. Again, you can name it whatever you want. That's just the naming convention, Pascal case. No spaces, every first letter is capitalized. All right, so now if you double click on that to open it up, what we want to do is detect when the player touches something, so like their left mouse button, for instance, they should activate the jump function. Now we don't want to create a whole new function because we would have to call something to call that then. So we have to use either start or update. Should we put this function in start or update? What do you think? update. Yes, because we don't want to call it at the very beginning of the game, because that would mean it only gets to jump once. So yeah, we want to check continuously every single frame. If the player is pressing a button, then we want to do something about it. So if we start typing in, this is something that I haven't shown you before, but this is called a conditional statement. If we type in if, so this is something like, if we press a button, then do this. So if, and then open up parentheses, close parentheses, and then we want to put down curly braces as well. So if something happens, do something about it. So inside of the parentheses here is where we put a value for whether or not this happens. This is called a Boolean, which basically just means true or false, just 1 or 0. So if we type in true, for example, then whatever happens inside of these curly braces will always happen. If we type in false, then whatever happens inside here never happens. That is not very useful though. So we want to do something that is a little bit more specific. It only happens sometimes. We want to do it whenever they press the mouse button. So there are a lot of functions inside of the input section of Unity. And so the way Unity categorizes it is inside of its own collection of functions. So if we type in input, capital I, and then put down a period to access more functions inside of that collection, we can type down get mouse button down. That's capital G-M-B-T, sorry, D. And then this is itself a function, so we can open parentheses, close parentheses, and now we have to tell it what button to press. There are typically 3 buttons on a mouse. There is left click, right click, middle click, and respectively that is, it's asking us to put in a number, so that is 0 for left click, 1 for right click, and 2 for middle click. In programming, we usually start counting from 0. So if we type in 0, then this will register everything, and now every single frame, if we have pressed the left mouse button, we do something. So if we wanted to, we could type in print blah 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 just to make sure that's working. But I actually want to put down something involving the jumper. So just like how we did in the jumper, we want to have a access to that jumper. So we can type in, oh yeah, that would work for the touchpad as well. So we can put in a property for the jumper component. We can actually delete this start because we won't be using it. And touchscreen. We can type down public because we want to be able to access this from the editor. And then we can just type down the name of our jumper component, jumper, and then we name this whatever we want. I'm going to call this jumper with a lowercase j. It's important to make this lowercase. If it was uppercase, then it would get confused sometimes. And it's confusing to read as well. So now that we have this, I can type down, just copy this, jumper, and then now we have access to everything that our jumper has. So if we put down a period, we get access to all of the functions it has. And because it is a component, it actually has quite a bit, but we have a superpower. We can put down custom stuff inside that jumper, which we did. So we can type down jump, capital J, and then open parentheses, close parentheses. I know, it's crazy.
Okay, actually though, when I first started making things happen in code, I felt like a wizard. I still feel like a wizard.
Coding is magic. It's just plain magic. You truly are a wizard. All right, so now if we save this and we go back to Unity, we want to add this component to the player, and then we want to add the jumper to that property. So we want to click Add Component, Input Controller, click that. And now we want to add in the jumper. I'm going to click the circle right next to that and double click on player because I want the jumper inside the player. All right, so now if we click on play, we can actually start left clicking this and we'll start jumping up and down.
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that last step with adding the jumper?
Yeah, sure. So anytime we want to add any component to any object, we want to go down to the inspector window, and at the bottom is the add component button. If we click on that, we can type in anything we want, but I want to add in the input controller that I just created. So if you type in input, you just click on the first thing, input controller, and then that will add that. Now what we want to do is assign the jumper to the input controller because we are accessing it via the script. So we can just drag and drop it into the property, or we can click on the circle right next to it to open up this menu and double click on player. Does that clarify it? Awesome.
I got 7 errors.
7. Okay. So usually when it's that many errors, it's probably something really simple. Could you start sharing your screen?
Yeah, sure.
Programming is incredibly case sensitive. The compiler, that is the machine that's reading the code, gets very, very mad at you if you do anything that it doesn't like. Okay. Okay, I see what you did. So you just put the public jumper inside of the start function instead of the component itself. So what you're basically saying there is this belongs to the function, but it doesn't belong to the function, it belongs to the entire component. So you have to put it outside of the start. So copy that and just put it at the top of start, for instance, above start.
Right above start? Like this? Okay.
And I'm sorry, one more point. When you mentioned adding a player to the input controller, you said you click the circle next to jumper?
Yeah, so if you click on that, then it will come up with this menu that has all of the jumpers in the scene, and we only have one, so it will only come up with one option, that's player. And so if we double click on that, that's saying we want the jumper inside of the player.
Okay, because mine's not showing up, so I don't know if I forgot to do something.
Okay, another thing that you can do you have the jumper component on the player actually?
That's probably why. Hold on.
Here, I'm gonna start sharing my screen now for your sake, sorry. For Anil's sake, rather.
Okay, yeah, now I can see the player.
Okay, sweet. All right, so Miguel, few more things. You're almost there. You're very close, actually. So at the very top, you have public class jumper.jumper. What you want, this is not a class per se. We're not creating a whole new object, so we just want to get rid of the class word. Let's get rid of the class.
I thought that was the problem, so I tried to fix that on my own.
Gotcha. And then the period, we want to get rid of the period because the way the syntax works, the way the language works, is that we have the access modifier first, that's the public word, and then we want to have the type, that's jumper, capital J, and then after that, after a space, we want to have the actual name of the property. We can name that whatever we want, but that's called jumper in that case. So yeah, you got that perfectly. Last thing is that inside update, inside the if get mouse button down, you have a capital J when that should be lowercase.
Okay, yeah, I just capitalized it just to see if that works.
Yeah, so that's sometimes what you would do. You would do a capital J if you're trying to call a function that belongs to the entire concept of jumper, but we aren't trying to do that. Instead, what we're trying to do is do it specifically to our property of jumper, the lowercase j. All right, but if you save that, it should work fine now.
Yeah, it works. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Now, if everyone clicks play, you should be able to click the screen and Flappy Bird, well, flaps. Does
anybody not have a jumping bird? We went through a lot of things right there.
Yeah, that was a lot of steps right there, so it's no problem if you're behind.
I'm getting an error on mine.
Mine's not flapping, it just falls.
So, be sure to have the components set up. So
Oh,
you might
right.
have, be
Yeah,
sure
I
to put
do
down
that.
the input controller and assign the jumper. So
Yeah.
what error you get? getting, Tyson?
Well, for me, it says. Sorry, one sec.
No worries.
It says that the variable controlled body of the jumper has not been assigned.
Oh, is it a null pointer error? Null pointer exception, NPE?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so is the error happening once, or is it happening every time you left click?
It's happening every time I left click.
Okay, yeah, that is a super easy error to fix called a null pointer exception.
Right.
And that usually just means you haven't assigned your components. So if I wager a guess, that means the jumper is still not assigned. It might have unassigned itself for some reason. So at the bottom right in the input controller, you have the jumper property. Does that say player jumper, or does that say none?
Oh, it says none.
Okay, yeah, that's why.
I was having the same issue, and I just selected the Flappy Bird. But also, make sure you click on the actual game window with the jump, because I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, you have to click inside the game window in order to jump. Null pointer errors are very, very common. Usually they're very easy to fix, but they're still annoying when they come up. Okay. Now is anyone missing a Flapping Bird? Awesome. So now, in order to make this game feel a little bit more complete, we're going to make it feel actually like a Flappy Bird, and we're going to have these pipes be moving around. So just in case anyone doesn't have the pipes right now, so what we want to do is take the pipe inside of the images folder, just drag and drop it into the scene, and we can actually select the rect tool, or we can select the scale tool, or we could even just go into the transform, and we want to increase the scale of the Y value. So setting it to 2, maybe 3 should work, just to make it taller. We can position that wherever we want. I'm going to set that to 2, I like that more. Alright, and now what we want to do is add in a second one, because Flappy Bird can't just fly over all of them, there's also ones at the top. So if we right click on pipe, we can select duplicate, and that will add in a second pipe that is over top of the first one. And so you can actually move that up, and you can rotate that. If you hold down shift, it will snap. I think you have to do that before you actually start rotating it though. So if you hold down shift and then you start rotating it, if you're on the rect tool, that's just by putting your mouse right over the corner. You start moving that around, you can just move it straight up and down. You can also go into the sprite renderer and select the flip option for Y, and that will flip it vertically. There's a few ways to do it. Alright, now that we have that though, we don't want the pipes to ever separate from each other. Whenever they move left and right, they're always together. If we ever move them up and down as well, they're still always together. They're kind of bound to each other. The two pipes, they don't move individually, so like this one can't start dancing. If this one never starts dancing, this one has to start dancing too. So we want them to be lined up, and I'm actually going to set both of their positions to 0, both of their X positions to 0, that is. The Y positions should stay the same because I want them in the middle of the screen for what I'm about to do. So if you create another component, you want to create an empty one this time. What we're going to do is create a parent component to bind them together so that instead of moving both of the pipes, we want to move just the parent, and then the children pipes, these two pipes, will move with that parent wherever it goes. So I'm going to name this whatever I want. I'm going to name it pipe parent. And now, in order to, I think I hear some clicking. I think that might be Tyson, or maybe Miguel.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. And now, in order to assign the pipes to the pipe parent, you just click on both of these. You can drag them into the parent right here. So again, it's a little bit hard to see, but you want to drag the pipe inside the hierarchy on top of the parent pipe, and that will move them to be children. So now, if you click on the pipe parent, and you start to move this around, you have to select the move tool for that. You can now move just the parent, and both the pipes will move with it, which is pretty cool. All right.
I'm
Now-
sorry, do you mind repeating the steps with creating the pipe parent again one more time?
No, absolutely. So I'm just going to create some extra pipes for an example. So what you want to do is right-click, or you can click this plus symbol, either of those inside the hierarchy. You need to click Create Empty, because we don't want this parent to have any components. We just want it to have the 2 pipe children, so it doesn't need any components. It's fine blank. And we want to name this, say, pipe parent. It can be whatever we want. And then if you hold down on these pipes while left clicking, I'm sorry, the Unity editor is really, really tiny, so it's probably hard to see on Gather. You can drag these over and on top of pipe parent, and that will assign them as children to the pipe parent. Okay. Does that clarify it a little bit? I can do it a different way if you'd prefer.
No, I think I got it.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to delete this extra one because I don't need it. All right, so now that we have this parent, what we want to do is just to move over the pipe to the left as the game progresses, but I'm not going to code this because we already have a precompiled script for us. But what we want this pipe to do is approach the player from moving to the left, and then whenever it gets to a certain point, it wants to teleport all the way to the right and start moving again. So we could set up a whole bunch of pipes, but we don't actually need to. We can just keep on reusing the same pipes over and over. So in order to do that, we just need to select the parent. Be sure to select the parent itself inside the hierarchy and not click on it in the scene, because then it will select one of the children. And we want to add in a component here. Now we're adding in a component, I guess. And we want to call this, or this is something that already exists, that we added in the scripts folder, pipe controller. So if we add in that, it should already work just like that. So if I click play with just this one pipe, you'll notice that Flappy Bird, we can still jump, and as the pipe reaches a certain point off the side, it'll teleport back and move over and continue moving. The script also adjusts the Y height of it a little bit, just for some increased variation. And so now all we have to do is put down a whole bunch of pipes. What we could do is instead spawn them, and as they exit the camera we could destroy them. That's another thing that we can do, but this is just an easier way to do that. We can just reuse the same ones. We can add in, actually that would be a good idea to add in the colliders now. Yeah, so before we actually start duplicating these pipes, let's use this one as a basis before we start to before we start to add in extra features to this. So we want to select both of these pipes. You can actually do this by holding down Control and selecting different objects. You can select multiple objects at the same time. Or you could do this to each individual child pipe. You need to click on Add Component, and we have to type in Collider, because again, this is a Collider 2D. And the good one for this, I think, would be Box Collider. You can mess around with others, like there's Capsule Collider, Circle Collider, etc., but Box Collider should be pretty good for this. So you'll notice that there is now a green outline over top the pipes. And just with that alone, if we click on play, we basically have Flappy Bird already. Oops. You notice that Flappy Bird gets pushed off a little bit. Now he's flying through the air and rotating. Cheerful. Alright.
So this is a great check-in moment since Flappy Bird is basically functional. Anybody who is not at this point yet, let's make sure we can get everybody there. Is anybody not here yet? Is anybody having problems?
Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
I have, I guess, one quick question, because I think I missed a step with adding the background. I don't know if maybe it was covered when I left.
So the background itself, I just I went over that when you were not here, but we just dragged and dropped that in from the images into the scene. And you want to click on the transform component inside position. We want to set the Z to 1 because it's actually rendering things in 3D, and we want to move that behind all of the birds and pipes. So set the Z to 1, and that should be all.
For position?
Yeah, for position.
Okay. Okay, all right. And then what was the last thing you did with the pipes with adding the box?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in order to add in a collider, if we click on the individual pipes, so I could click on this, I want to go to Add Component and type in Collider, and I want to select the Box Collider 2D. And if I click on that, it should just automatically map it. I'm going to delete the extra one because I don't need it. And then you want to do the same with the other one.
All right.
All right, is anyone else not here? If you click on play, you should be able to essentially play a silly version of Flappy Bird. Awesome. I'm gonna check over here. Okay, so now that we have Flappy Bird, I'm gonna move this pipe parent over just a little bit, and we don't want this bird to just move over to the side whenever the pipes touch it. What we want to happen is that the game should be over. You shouldn't be able to play anymore if you lose the game. And so what we want to do is add in some extra functionality that will destroy the player as soon as the player touches a collider. So in order to do that, we want to type in, we want to create a new script, and inside the scripts folder, if you right-click that, create C# script. That's pronounced C#, by the way. I don't know if I clarified that. We want to type in destroyer. So it's just like destroy, ER, because this is something that destroys the player. Destroy is a bit of an intense word, but that basically just means remove it from the scene, get rid of it. So if we double click on that, it'll open up Visual Studio. And one thing that we didn't cover quite yet, was that there's actually a lot more functions than just start and update. There's a lot of functions that come with this mono behavior class. This is what gives us all of the functionality that a component has. This is what allows us to say that this is a component. And one of the functions that we can use to give it some extra functionality is a function that will detect whenever the object that this component is attached to touches another collider, then at that point you can fire your own custom code. So if we, just trying to find this, we can actually get rid of start and update because we aren't trying to call this every frame, and we aren't trying to call this on start. We're trying to call it at a very custom time. There is a function called on, we have to start it with void because it's a function. So void space and on collision enter 2D. There's also on collision enter without the 2D, but we're messing with a 2D game right now, so we want that specifically. And again, in order to declare this as a function, we need open parentheses, close parentheses. Oh my goodness, that just auto-corrected everything. And then we also want to have open curly braces, close curly braces. This function is also a little bit special because it will also require us to give an argument inside of the function that will allow us to access that every time we want to do anything with this script. So we want to type in collision 2D because that's the type of argument. Whenever we are declaring a function, we have to declare the type of the argument in addition to the name of the argument instead of just the name of it or just passing it through. And then we want to type in, again, we can name this whatever we want, but I'm going to call this collision. And so what this is saying is every time this collides with anything else, so long as it has a collider, this will give us the information of that collision. So it might say what speed it's going at and what things are attached to that collider, etc. So all we want to do is destroy the game object that the collision is happening to. So what we could do is type in a custom function called destroy. This is a function that comes with the component, the mono behavior class. So if we type in destroy, capital D, we want to give it an argument. This is what we are destroying. We want to type in collision, but we aren't destroying the collision, we're destroying the game object, the other game object that we are touching, because we don't want to destroy ourselves, we want to destroy whatever we are touching. So collision dot, again we type in a period to access any properties, and then in this case it's already at the very top of this list, just game object, that's a capital O. And with that, that's all we need. All we want is that whenever this touches something, it destroys the other thing. So if we go back over to Unity, we want to add in this component to both of the pipes, the child pipe specifically. We can't add it to the parent because the parent doesn't have any colliders, only the children have colliders. Alright, so I go to add component, I type in destroyer.
I'm getting an error again.
Ooh, what's that?
It says non-invocable member destroyer cannot be used like a method. What did I do wrong?
Okay, so syntax errors are super common, don't worry. So let's share your screen and see if we can figure out what's going on here.
Okay.
Syntax is the most confusing part about programming, but eventually you'll learn the language enough that it just comes naturally.
Seems every time we make some coding, I get it.
Yeah, it's really common, and here at the Indie Game Academy, we completely support you on your journey of failing fast and failing forward. Okay, so, oh, I see. So you typed in destroyer, open parentheses, instead of destroy. That's why.
Must have corrected me.
Oh, that might have happened, yeah. It might have auto-corrected.
Fun. Let me check on Unity.
Okay. Now if we add the component to both of these pipes, destroyer, and we click on play, now we have something that looks much more like Flappy Bird. So if we type a pipe, the player will go away. Poof.
Can't we add the script to the parent?
You don't want to add in the component to the parent because the way the script works is that whenever this object collides with something, we want to destroy the other thing. But the parent itself doesn't collide with anything, it just moves around. There's no collider on the parent, but there are colliders on the children, so that's why we want to add it to the individual pipes.
Gotcha.
Another thing that you could do, since you asked, you can add it to the player and modify the script a little bit to destroy itself. That is another way you can do it, but then that would make it so that anytime the player touches anything, it goes poof. Like if we want to add in power-ups or floor and ceiling, it would also go poof, and we don't want that. Let's see. We show the code for the destroyer? Sure. So it's just like this. It's on collision enter 2D, and then inside there is collision 2D. Again, all of this stuff is very case sensitive. Not all of it. The individual names that you give it, that is not case sensitive. Everything else is though. When you have that though, are you good, Anil? Just let me know when you're good and I'll move on. Okay, sweet. We changed argument to call instead of collision. Okay. If you go back into Unity, now we can actually start making a game that feels kind of fun. And if we right-click this and click duplicate, I also just like to press Control D on my keyboard as a short key to duplicate. You can be sure to have the move tool selected and just move this a little bit over to the right. I'm going to do this a few times. I'm clicking Control D while I have the parent selected and just moving it over to the right. Alright, and so now whenever I play the game, it'll move the stuff randomly because that's how the script works. I'm immediately noticing that this game is way too hard. They're way too packed together. There's also this big gap right here. So in order to fix that gap, all I have to do is add in more pipes. But I kind of want to space these out because that game is too hard.
This is game design.
This is game design. In game design, you'll be doing a lot of testing with people to make sure that this game is as difficult as you want it to be. You can also just test it with yourself, but then you're making the game for yourself and not someone else. Oops, I died immediately. I'm not very good at this game. Awesome. I died again. What you might also do is increase the distance between the two pipes. The two children pipes, that is. But at that point, you have a full game. Does anyone not have Flappy Bird implemented? We're going to be adding in a few extra things as well.
I think as we're coming to the end of time, we might not want to add too much more.
Okay. Yeah, we have a UI controller, and I think that's it. We can skip on that, though. Awesome.
Yeah, we want a couple of minutes to like decompress and ask questions. So I think the UI controller could be a bonus. We'll send around a recording of this, and I'll include a different recording that has the UI controller for anybody who wants to add that.
Awesome.
You could maybe do you want to give like high level couple of bullet points on how to do the UI controller for anybody who wants to try it themselves?
Yeah, so what you want to do is you want to, again, go to plus, and you want to create a text mesh pro. And I think the actual script is using a older version of Unity that used an outdated text API. So you'll want to go to legacy and type in text. And you'll want to position that on the screen, so that's at the top left or wherever you want to be. And then you'll want to add on the score keeper component onto that. And you should have the score tracking automatically from there. There's a few more things in this game as well that we gave you. For example, there's a oh, I need some water and I'm out of water. There's a sound folder that has some example sound effects. So you could put you could put down some music, and you could also add in some sound effects whenever you jump. But besides that, you have a full game now. This is Flappy Bird.
I think that calls for celebration. Core tenant number 2. Can everybody please enter gather and then hit F for me? Well done, everybody! Wow! Good job. All right, this can be a lot. Unity and C# are not the most user-friendly, unfortunately, so that's why we host these classes. I'm glad everybody got through it. I'm going to say a couple of things here, and then I'll hand it off to Dylan for any Q&A, if anybody who wants to chat. So first of all, yeah, well done, everybody. Like, congratulations. This is your first step towards the game dev journey. I really truly mean it when one of the best things you can do for yourself in your game dev career, literally whatever you want to do with it, whether you want to break in and be a professional, start your own studio, or just do it for fun, is make games. So keep making games, keep working on them, and then release them as much as you can. itch.io is a fantastic resource to find game jams, which is a great way to just make a game really quickly. And then it's also a wonderful place to host your games. It's totally free and it's pretty easy to do. So this was a sample of the Indie Game Academy. Can we do one more F for Dylan? This is Dylan's first official IGA class. Well done, Dylan.
I'll also need a different kind of F in chat
You did great. You did wonderful. Okay, so the Indie Game Academy is all about fun gamified learning. We have a couple of things that we do differently than other people. Number one, we're multidisciplinary as much as possible. So we like to bring people together who have different skill sets and get them working together, because that's how it works in the industry. I didn't know if you know that. So people work together. You know, you are an engineer and you'll work with an artist, or you're a game designer and you'll work with product people. It's a huge part of what you actually experience, and it's something that we think is criminally lacking in other resources. So we try to get you working with actual teams. What you experienced here was very much an intro class to make sure you understand how Unity works, and so that you can start building your own games. But we have a couple of other classes that are available to you. Now, before I even mention those, now that we know that you guys are cool, you are all very much welcome and invited to our Discord. I just dropped a chat over on the right-hand side. Our Discord is relatively exclusive. We don't invite people in until they have shown us that they are good people. We try to create a really wonderful, supportive, kind, and patient environment, and I think we have succeeded in doing so. A bunch of really good people, so come join us. I also have a small gift for you. So if you do join the Discord, you have now all earned your level 0 badge. Congratulations. That is our like little intro badge for fun. So if you type exactly that, you can see it in the chat again. I earned my level 0 badge. Anywhere in the Discord, in the general channel, anywhere else, you will immediately get greeted by a bot who gives you a level 0 badge. Congrats. That's your little gift for finishing today. And then the last thing is we have other upcoming classes. So first of all, if you enjoy this, next week we have another one. Very similar structure, but you'll be learning to make Mario. You'll be making a platformer game. So a little bit more advanced. That is the link in the chat once again. And because... Crap, I actually forget it. And because you took this class, we have a policy here where once you finish one of our classes, any classes at that level or lower are permanently 50% off for you. So you can come and join that class next week for 50% off if you type in the code. Actually, I forget it. Anybody remember what the code is? Dylan, you remember?
I can't remember.
Here, I'm
Sorry.
missing. What's that?
Sorry, I don't remember.
That's okay.
1950?
I don't think that's it anymore.
Oh.
Wait, I just sent an email to somebody who was asking about it. Hold on. This is embarrassing. Here we go. Oh, that's not the right code anyway. I think you can use IGA 50, so try that for me, and if it doesn't work, you can message us and let us know. And the last one, if you liked this class, this is really just meant to help people who have no idea where to start. But really our first class that gives you all the tastes of IGA is our level 1 program. It is a weekend-long boot camp. You spend 8 hours. So what you just did in 2 hours is pretty impressive. Imagine what you can do in 8. And what we do during that 8-hour program is we teach you a bunch of different things. So we show you some fundamentals of game design, how game designers actually work in the industry. We show you some fundamentals of production, what it actually looks like for a team to plan a game together. And we definitely show you how to make games. So in this next one coming up October 22nd, you will be learning to make Galaga. We'll be making a Galaga clone. And you'll be having fun and being goofballs because that's what we do here in this very room. So that is coming up. That is a $50 class. But you can use another code that I don't remember. Hold on, I can look it up. You can use the code that I'll paste in just a second to join. So consider either of those. Definitely come into Discord. It's for free. It's really helpful to your career, and we're just good people. And otherwise, I'm going to hand it off to Dylan. And I'm going to say thank you to all of you for coming. It's been a wonderful class. And I'm going to hand it off to Dylan to answer any questions that you may have for the rest of the class period. Thank you, everybody.
One more thing that I wanted to show everyone, I wasn't sure if I would be able to show this off, but if you just go to Google and type in Unity API, you will be able to click on the very first thing, and this is the script reference. This shows you absolutely everything in Unity, all of the functions that we were going over. In fact, it's kind of a little bit intense, but this is where all of the functions are happening. You can actually type in each individual function. So for example, we showed off, what was the function that we used? I don't even remember. On collision, enter. So if we type in on collision, we will be able to go right here and it will give us all of the details of it. There's also the Unity help forums. In addition to our own Discord, we help out people who are learning game development all the time. So I just really wanted to show off that resource because there's a lot of resources out there that can help you out.
Yeah, the Discord is pretty phenomenal for getting help. We have a help each other channel that people post to all the time. So if you're having issues, you can post to there, and some rando will tell you what you can do. You can type the I earned my level 0 badge literally anywhere in the Discord. So just type it in the general channel. It'll actually hide it from everybody else, so they won't even see that you're posting. They'll just get your badge and a role on the Discord. I looked up the discount code. So it is IGA Cares for 20% off. Of the level 0 class. So just for context, our big program that's 3 months long with a little over 50 hours of live class time is thousands of dollars. Our level 1 class for 8 hours of class time is only $50. We're really trying to make it accessible for anybody who wants to understand how to break into the industry, and now you can get it for $40. So I encourage you to come. It's a fun time. All right. Any questions for Dylan?
We went over a lot. Oh, we have some stuff in the nearby chat.
Design those art pieces for this game.
So I'm going to defer to Willem for that, but the actual assets that we used, I'm pretty sure they're just straight from Flappy Bird.
Yeah, those ones are just straight from Flappy Bird. One place, though, there's plenty of great resources out there for getting free art for your games. One of the best ones that we didn't show in this class, simply because there's a lot to show in 2 hours, is actually the Unity Asset Store. So just search Unity Asset Store, and you'll find all kinds of good stuff. I also posted there Kenny.nl, which has been...
That's a great one.
Yeah, he's basically a designer who just likes designing, and he puts up all his stuff for free. And it's really an impressive amount of really beautiful, high-quality, both 2D and 3D art. So you can look at Kenny, and then the Unity Asset Store has paid stuff, but it also has plenty of free stuff too. So check that out as well.
A lot of people make by making a Unity game with just the asset store stuff. Like, it comes with scripts, it comes with models. There are literally people that make entire games just from the asset store. Also want to point out, if you're a little bit more interested in programming, I am hosting another class that is focusing on how you can do a lot of different things in Unity with very little coding in 2 weeks, I believe. That's in the Discord. And I don't know if that is... We'll be going over some advanced topics, not too many, honestly. I actually don't think we'll be going over any advanced topics. It'll be a great class. That'll be really, 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 really helpful. I wish I learned that stuff just a year ago, even. Yeah, we went over a lot. We went over... Sorry, what's that?
I was about to say, it looks like our bot is not working for the badge. So I'm going to go through and give you the badges. But unfortunately, that means you don't get the bot saying, well done, starting your journey and stuff. So I'll just say that to you. Good job starting your journey, everybody. Very proud of all of you. You're now on a crash course for success and goodness and video games. I'm happy to have you all here. I love seeing people break into the industry. The creative potential that comes out of video games is just incredible. So thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to the server, too. All right. Any last questions or anything like that?
I believe the IGA Cares code is for 20%.
Correct. Must be in one script if you wanted to, but if we keep making many scripts. You see that question there?
Oh, is that a question? Okay. So, you can put most of these in one script if you wanted to, but if we keep on making many scripts like we are, wouldn't it create inefficiencies? Okay. I thought you were talking to other people. I didn't realize you were asking me. Sorry about that. So, I would say no. So, I've actually been trying to, when I very first started game programming, I started somehow by wanting to create a Pokemon game. And I started it out and I put everything in a single script. It was the slowest game that I've ever played, and it was impossible to maintain. I would absolutely not recommend that approach. In fact, I scrapped that pretty quick, and I moved over to something that was even a tiny bit more maintainable. There were just a few extra scripts that I split things across, and it became immediately better. If you put everything into one script, then usually what happens is you'll be finding yourself putting things in large if statements. So you'll notice that we created a single if statement in this class, and if you have everything in one script, that if statement will have a billion things inside of it, and there will be nested if statements. So if this, if this, if this, inside if this and this, it gets really, really big and really, really intense. I wouldn't recommend that. There's a large number of programming patterns. Does anyone else have any questions?
I was going to add to that. I think the word inefficiency is sort of, it could mean a lot of different things. I'm not exactly sure what you mean. If you're talking about code inefficiency, so the code running poorly, it will make basically for the most part, no difference whether the code is in one file or many files. If you're talking about your personal inefficiency, it is way worse to have it in one file. If you have it in one file, it's going to wind up literally thousands of lines long. And so trying to find where different things are happening is going to be a huge pain in the butt. One of the reasons Unity's component-based system is so nice, where you have like the jumper that just does jumping, or you have the input controller that just listens for input. One of the reasons that's so nice is because now if the jump stops working, if Mario is jumping backwards for some reason, you go straight to the jumper, and that's where the problem is going to be. So it's really nice and organized. It can get disorganized in different ways. Everything has pros and cons, but I would always recommend against a single file. As far as performance, it won't make a difference.
What is the name of the... Sorry.
I have a question.
Sure, I'll answer this one real quick, and then I'll get to you. What is the name of the script program you use? If you're talking about the script editor, the IDE, Integrated Development Environment, I'm using Visual Studio. Visual Studio is really good for Unity. It integrates in a lot of ways. If you're talking about the language, that's C#. What was that, Miguel?
This is more of a curiosity question. But like, how common is it, like in Unity, in the Unity engine specifically, or in the game industry, to have like scripts with 300 plus lines of code? Because it seems like the best practice is to keep them all separated. So
yes.
I was just wondering about that.
If everyone was very nice and we all cared about clean code like I do, then no one would. No one would ever have scripts that big. Unfortunately, what we tend to do as developers is try to speed through things and not go for the quick approach, and instead try to make it so that it is as we go for the I want to script as much as I can super fast, and so usually we jumble it together. It happens more often than it should. I think for my own games, my scripts are getting pretty long, and if I cared more about clean code than as I wish I did, then I would definitely clean this up a good bit.
I think I am an advocate for, when all of you're all just getting started right now, and this is a whole can of worms, y'all. There is so much depth to all of this. There's reasons that people spend their entire career doing this stuff. So what I'm usually an advocate for is just make it work first. Don't worry about how efficient you're doing it or how well it's organized or anything like that. Just make it work, because there's so much for you to learn all at once that it's not worth like being like, oh, maybe this will be slightly more efficient. If you get like excited by that and you get into that, sure, go for it. But as far as your first couple of projects, I'd say just make it work however the heck you can make it work. Sounds like Kokoro is having efficiency problems. Having it split into multiple scripts probably won't change the efficiency. Trying to get games to run well is its own massive area of development that is honestly very confusing. There are a few people who can do that very well. Optimizing how a game runs is what you'd be looking for. Probably some of the big things that will take up bandwidth and make your game run more poorly. 3D models and assets, if they're very complicated, having too many of them on the screen at once will tank your performance. Particles, if there's too many particles going on, that'll tank your performance. Your game could be running inefficiently and causing the lag, but like, unless you're building something really big, I would actually guess that's unlikely for you, just because you're getting started pretty recently. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into efficiency, and the number of scripts you have has little to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as lines of code, there are plenty of professional engineers who have files that are thousands of lines long.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's the best way to do it, but once again, I think, do it the way that makes sense to you, that you can make work, and then you can worry about making it nice once you're a little bit more comfortable.
I think I might have a chart on hand somewhere that is number of... Ooh, is this a... Okay, no. I have a chart somewhere that is the average number of lines of code per company, per software company, and it's you can tell just by looking at that how much they care about clean code.
It's a lot.
Is asking, how do you find ideas for game, like for game design? Is there a class for that as well? So I
Ooh.
believe the level 1 program does go over game design.
It goes over a little bit of ideation. Yeah, we'll do an exercise called a filter list.
Yeah, and for game ideas, that is... the way I usually do it, I usually just write down every idea that I come across, and I usually come up with ideas just by thinking about mundane things in the world. I was going to a amusement park at one point, and they had a bubble machine set up, and they were blowing bubbles all over the place, and I just thought to myself, that looks very majestic. I want a game out of that. I want a game where you can be a bubble wizard or something in this magical city and going around blowing bubbles. And so I wrote down that idea. You can also have prompts, like you can have brainstorming sessions where you just write down everything as much as you can, and you might give yourself some prompts to help guide that brainstorming. And one tip that I've heard is just to constantly be moving around. Your desk that you are sitting at is, you've been sitting there for a while probably, and all of these things on your desk have probably been there for a long time, so they are kind of inhibiting your creativity. Once in a while, try moving your desk around a little bit and placing different things on the desk, and that'll give you some additional creativity boosts as well. Is another tip that I've heard.
We will we'll have to do a class on like brainstorming and ideation at some point, because that is a huge area of game development. I will tell you that it is less important professionally than you think it is. Unfortunately, once you get into the professional world, it's pretty rare that you come up with game ideas. Mostly it's a collaborative effort, so it's the whole team arguing about what they should make for a couple of weeks. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, like I said, our community is ridiculously supportive. Every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, we host a podcast live on our Discord. We bring in members of the game industry so that you can have actual conversations with them and ask them about their experience. Next week, we're bringing in Jessica Rowley, who is actually the chief of community here at the Indie Game Academy. She's been working in the game space for a while. She's actually a national champion at deer hunt, where you like shoot deer at an arcade. Who knew? So she's going to be talking about how to build community surrounding your indie game. But that's one of the free ones that you can come and join. It happens every single week, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on our Discord. And either way, one of the things that we very intentionally, to the best of our ability, create in our Discord is a supportive environment. So any of these questions are welcome, and you're not going to find anybody who gives you grief about not knowing something. They're going to be excited to help you out. So I encourage you to perpetuate that energy, be good to the other people on our server, and then also ask. One of the best ways for you to grow is to simply ask people for advice. I'm so happy to have had you all here. I'm so happy, Dylan, that you taught. Well done. That was great. And otherwise, I hope to see you in our Discord. I hope to see you at some of our future classes. Level 1 is freaking awesome. This is only the first year where we have it fully designed like this as a weekend boot camp. And it was so exciting what a difference it made when we structured it this way. So I'd love to have you come experience that with us. But otherwise, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Anil. Thank you, Tyson. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Josh. Who else? Joseph. Miguel, of course, Miguel. Thank you, Miguel. Miguel went through our level 3 program as well. Thank you, Kukuro and Cameron. I hope everybody has a wonderful night. I hope to see you again soon. Take care of yourselves. Be good to the world. Dylan, you wanna close it out or anything?
I think you did it perfectly. I almost think you stole my spotlight, honestly.
Sorry. Well, this is why I shouldn't be here anymore. You did great. I don't need to be. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.